Mom demanded I hand over my $141,000 apartment to her spiritual teacher, who promised to cleanse my karma for 7 lifetimes. I refused, and she cut me off completely. 18 months later, I got a devastating phone call. I never thought I'd have to choose between my mother and my home. But that's exactly what happened when she fell under the influence of a man who called himself a spiritual teacher. A man who saw my apartment as the next piece in his carefully constructed empire of exploitation. My mother raised me mostly alone. My father left when I was 7, and she became everything: provider, protector, guide. She worked as a nurse for 30 years, pulling double shifts to keep us afloat, making sure I had what I needed even when she didn't. She was practical, grounded, the kind of person who balanced checkbooks and compared prices and never bought anything on impulse. Spiritual but not church-going, she'd describe herself. She believed in karma, positive thinking, the idea that good energy attracts good things. Normal stuff. The kind of beliefs that make you feel better without costing you anything. Then, 2 years ago, everything changed. It started innocently enough. She was approaching 60, thinking about retirement, feeling that particular kind of loss that comes when the structure that's defined your life for decades is about to disappear. A friend recommended a meditation workshop. Spiritual wellness was the term used. The workshop was run by a man who called himself simply a guide. My mother will call him the teacher. I'll call him what he actually was, but I'm getting ahead of myself. She attended one workshop, then another, then weekly sessions, then private consultations that cost $200 an hour. Within 6 months, she was volunteering at his center, donating money, talking about him the way people talk about profits. He understands things others don't. He can see energy fields. He healed my back pain just by touching me. I met him once, early on, when my mother was still excited to introduce us. He was 50, carefully groomed, wearing white linen that looked expensive but not ostentatious. Soft-spoken, with intense eye contact that felt practiced rather than natural. He talked about universal energy, and ascending consciousness, and releasing material attachments. Everything about him felt rehearsed, like watching an actor who'd perfected a character through years of performance. My instincts screamed that something was wrong, but I kept quiet. My mother seemed happy. Maybe it was harmless. It wasn't harmless. Over the next 2 years, I watched my practical, grounded mother transform into someone I barely recognized. She donated approximately $40,000 to the teacher's spiritual center, which turned out to be a rented room in a strip mall with some cushions and incense. She stopped seeing old friends because they vibrated at lower frequencies. She quit her book club of 15 years, worldly distractions. She started wearing only white, eating only what the teacher recommended, speaking in phrases that sounded copied directly from his lectures. I watched my mother become a walking advertisement for a man who charged hundreds of dollars an hour for energy sessions. While she descended into this world, I was building my own life. I worked in software development, saved carefully, lived below my means. At 25, I bought a small apartment, $141,000, modest but mine. 1 bedroom, decent light, a neighborhood that was improving. It represented everything I'd done right: discipline, planning, independence. The apartment my mother had worked so hard to teach me to achieve. She'd never shown much interest in my apartment before. It was nice, but not relevant to her spiritual journey. Until suddenly, it became very relevant. The conversation that changed everything happened on a Tuesday evening. My mother asked to visit my apartment, unusual, since she usually wanted me to come to her place, which was closer to the teacher's center. She arrived with an energy I didn't like. Nervous but determined, like someone about to ask for something they know is unreasonable. "I need to talk to you about something important," she said, sitting on my couch but not settling into it. "About your apartment." My stomach tightened. "What about it?" She took a breath, and I could see her gathering courage. "The teacher's current space is inadequate. He needs a proper center to expand his healing work. Your apartment, it's in a good location, it has the right energy flow. It would be perfect for spiritual gatherings and healing sessions." She paused. "He saw a photo of your apartment and said the energy was extraordinary. He said it was destined to serve a higher purpose." "Mom," I said slowly, "what exactly are you asking?" "I want you to transfer your apartment to the spiritual center, to the teacher's organization." The words came out in a rush. It would become a place of healing. You'd be giving a gift to humanity. And in return, you'd receive blessings beyond anything material. The teacher promised, your karma would be cleansed for 7 lifetimes. 7 lifetimes. Do you understand what that means? I stared at my mother. The woman who taught me to save money, to be practical, to never trust anything that sounds too good to be true, was asking me to give my apartment to a guru in exchange for karma cleansing. Mom, I'm not giving my apartment to anyone. Especially not to someone who charges people for healing sessions and calls himself a spiritual teacher. Her face changed. The nervousness disappeared, replaced by agitation. You don't understand him. You've never given him a chance. He has gifts, real gifts. He's helped so many people. He healed my chronic pain. He opened my third eye. He showed me the meaning of existence. And all he asks in return is support for his work. Your apartment could help thousands of people find peace. How can you be so selfish? Selfish. The word hit me like a slap. This was my mother, calling me selfish for refusing to give away the home I'd worked years to afford. But I was seeing something else too. This was textbook cult manipulation. Isolate the person from old relationships. Create dependence on the leader. Extract resources gradually. My mother had already given $40,000. Now they wanted my apartment, approximately $141,000 more. The total extraction would have been over $180,000 from one family. This wasn't about my mother's spiritual growth. This was about systematic robbery. Update 1. The investigation. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my mother's face when she called me selfish. About the way she'd recited the teacher's promises like memorized scripture. About how much money she'd already given him. I decided to do what my mother no longer could, research. I started with his website. It was professionally designed, full of vague language about awakening and transformation. Testimonials from devoted followers praising his gifts. Pricing for various sessions, ranging from $100 to $500. Nothing technically illegal, but nothing substantive either. Just empty promises wrapped in spiritual language. I dug deeper. I paid $200 for a professional background check. The results made my blood run cold. His real name was different from his spiritual name. Over the past 10 years, he'd moved between 3 states, each time leaving behind a trail of complaints. No criminal record, he was too careful for that, but multiple civil lawsuits. 2 followers had sued him for fraud. Both cases were settled out of court with non-disclosure agreements, but the court filings were still accessible. The patterns were there if you knew where to look. Previous spiritual centers in other cities. All closed. All with similar trajectories. Charismatic leader, devoted followers, significant financial extraction, sudden departure when scrutiny increased. I found online forums where ex-followers shared their stories. One woman gave him $75,000 over 3 years. Another signed over her car. A third refinanced her house to donate $50,000. The stories were remarkably consistent. He targeted lonely, vulnerable people, often middle-aged women, made them feel special and understood, created emotional dependence, then extracted money through donations, workshops, and special sessions. The teacher wasn't just a guru. He was a serial con artist who'd refined his technique over decades. She gave him $40,000 over 2 years. Her retirement savings. Money she earned working 30 years as a nurse, pulling doubles, sacrificing to provide for us. And then she asked me to give him my apartment too. My $141,000 apartment. The total extraction would have been over $180,000 from one family. That's not spirituality. That's systematic robbery dressed in white linen and meditation cushions. I printed everything. The lawsuits. The forum posts. The pattern across 3 states. I compiled it into a folder and asked my mother to meet me for coffee. Mom, I need you to look at this. I pushed the folder across the table. Before you cut me out of your life, before you give him anything else, just look at what I found. She physically recoiled from the folder. What is this? Evidence. The teacher has done this before. In 3 different states. He takes people's money, closes the center, moves to a new city, starts again. These are court documents. Complaints from his previous followers. You're not special to him, Mom. You're a mark. She pushed the folder back across the table without opening it. This is negativity. Lower vibrations trying to prevent ascension. The teacher warned me this would happen, that people close to me would try to block my spiritual growth. He said the dark forces would use my own son. She looked at me with something that might have been pity. I didn't want to believe him. The cold feeling in my stomach intensified. He'd predicted this. The teacher had predicted that evidence against him would surface, and he'd pre-framed it as dark forces attacking his followers. Classic cult technique. Inoculate followers against facts before the facts arrive. He warned her that dark forces would try to block her ascension, that people close to her would present evidence. He predicted I'd find the lawsuits, the complaints, and pre-framed it as evil trying to stop her. Classic cult technique. Inoculate against facts before facts arrive. By the time I had proof, she was already trained to reject it. I tried a different approach. Mom, has he asked you for money? She hesitated. Donations are voluntary. To support the work. How much have you given him? Her defensiveness was immediate. That's between me and my spiritual path. I'm guessing over $40,000 based on your bank statements that you showed me last year. That's your retirement savings, Mom. That's what you worked 30 years for. She started crying. You don't understand. Money is just energy. I'm investing in my soul, not a bank account. You're too attached to the material world. That's why you won't give your apartment. You're trapped in materiality, and it's blocking your ascension. I left that coffee shop knowing I'd lost the argument. Facts didn't matter. Evidence didn't matter. My mother wasn't thinking clearly anymore. The teacher had gotten too deep into her head. Update 2. The escalation. Over the following weeks, my mother's campaign intensified. Daily texts about the apartment. How it was meant for a higher purpose. How I was blocking divine will. How my refusal was creating negative karma not just for me but for our entire family line. She started showing up at my apartment unannounced. During these visits, she'd leave crystals and incense around to clear the negative energy making you resist. She'd walk through the rooms, touching walls, whispering what I assume were prayers or blessings, trying to cleanse my home of whatever darkness she believed was preventing me from giving it away. Then the teacher's followers started appearing at my door. Strangers who introduced themselves as members of the spiritual center, who wanted to discuss the opportunity to serve. They were polite but persistent, showing up at odd hours, always with the same message. My apartment could change lives, I was being selfish, the universe was calling me to a higher purpose. It was a coordinated campaign. I was being harassed into compliance. Eventually, the teacher himself made contact. A phone call from an unknown number. His voice was smooth and practiced, exactly as I remembered. Your mother speaks of you often. She says you're resistant to the spiritual path. I understand, the material world has a strong pull on young souls. But I see something in you. A potential. Your apartment carries energy that could heal thousands. Imagine the karma of such a gift. You would be blessed beyond measure. I've seen your history, I said. The lawsuits. The complaints. The pattern across 3 states. You're not a healer. You're a con man who's found a profitable niche exploiting lonely people. Silence. Then his voice hardened slightly beneath the practiced smoothness. Your mother warned me you were lost. I had hoped to guide you. I see now you're beyond help. He hung up. The background check cost me $200. It showed he'd done this in 3 states. Lawsuits, complaints, sudden departures. He wasn't a misunderstood healer facing persecution from closed minds. He was a serial predator who'd refined his technique over decades. My mother wasn't his first victim. She was just his current one. And I was the obstacle preventing his biggest score yet. 2 days after that call, my mother delivered an ultimatum. I could hear the teacher's phrasing in her words. She was reading from a script he'd given her. If you won't support my spiritual path, I can't have you in my life. You're a negative influence. You carry dark energy. The teacher says I need to release people who block my ascension. I'm giving you one last chance. Transfer the apartment, and we can have a relationship. Refuse, and I have to let you go. For my spiritual survival. She gave me an ultimatum. Transfer the apartment or lose her forever. The teacher wrote those words. I could hear his phrasing in her mouth. He was using my love for my mother as a weapon against me. He knew I'd do almost anything to keep her. Almost anything. Not everything. Not my apartment. I looked at my mother, this woman who'd raised me, who'd sacrificed everything for me, and I saw a stranger wearing her face. A stranger controlled by a man who saw us both as resources to extract. I love you, I said. I'll always love you. But I'm not giving my apartment to someone who has exploited people across 3 states. If you need to release me to stay in his cult, I understand. But I'll be here when you're ready to leave. And I hope that day comes before he takes everything from you. She said giving my apartment would cleanse my karma for 7 lifetimes. I don't know what 7 lifetimes of karma looks like. I know what losing a $141,000 apartment looks like. It looks like homelessness. It looks like starting over from zero. Lifetimes are abstract. Housing is concrete. I chose concrete. Update 3. The separation. My mother followed through on her threat. Within a day, I was blocked on her phone, on social media, on email. Every avenue of communication was cut off. I reached out through other family members. Most were also concerned about my mother but felt powerless to intervene. My aunt tried to talk to her. She'd attempted a similar intervention 6 months earlier and had also been released from my mother's life. The teacher had systematically isolated my mother from everyone who might show her the truth. I entered a painful limbo. I still had my apartment. I still had my job, my life, my independence. But I'd lost my mother to a man who saw her as nothing more than a bank account with emotions. I sent birthday cards that went unanswered. I left voicemails she never returned. I watched from a distance through mutual friends who still had limited contact, gathering fragments of information about her life. She'd quit her nursing job. The teacher said it was draining her spiritual energy. She'd moved into a shared house with other followers. She was spending every day at the center, volunteering, recruiting, giving whatever money she still had access to. The waiting was unbearable. Watching someone you love destroy themselves and being completely powerless to stop it. Knowing that any attempt to help would be seen as attack. That facts and evidence and love didn't matter in the face of carefully constructed delusion. I kept my apartment. I kept living my life. But part of me was frozen, waiting for the inevitable conclusion. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to be destroyed alongside someone you love. I could have given him the apartment. It wouldn't have saved my mother. It would have just made me another victim. And when he eventually left, because these people always leave, we'd both have nothing. At least this way, one of us would still be standing. Months passed. 10 months. 12 months. 18 months. I heard through the grapevine that the center was expanding, that the teacher was planning to open new locations, that my mother was one of his most devoted followers. She'd given him everything, her money, her time, her relationships, her identity. And then, one Tuesday morning, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Hello. Crying. Gasping sobs that took me a moment to identify. Mom. He left. Her voice was broken, barely recognizable. He just left. Took everything and went to Florida. The center is closed. My money is gone. I have nothing. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Update 4. The aftermath. The teacher's pattern had completed itself again. Extract everything possible, then disappear before consequences arrive. He'd been planning his exit for months, according to what my mother later told me. Slowly liquidating assets, making arrangements, setting up his next location. And then one morning, he was just gone. The center was locked. His phone was disconnected. His followers were left confused, devastated, financially ruined. He disappeared 18 months after giving my mother the ultimatum. Took everything and went to Florida. The pattern completed itself. And she called me crying, finally seeing what I'd seen all along. The con was over. But the damage was done. $40,000 gone. 2 years gone. Our relationship nearly gone. All for a man who sold Awakening to lonely people and bought himself a new life in Florida. My mother was financially devastated. The $40,000 plus she'd donated was gone, obviously. You don't get donations back. Her retirement savings evaporated. She'd quit her nursing job, so she had no income. She was 60 years old with almost nothing and no safety net. I met her at a coffee shop. She looked 10 years older than when I'd last seen her. Exhausted. Ashamed. Broken. I can't believe I fell for it, she said. Everything you told me was true. All the evidence you showed me. I couldn't see it. He made me feel special. Like I mattered. Like I was part of something important. He was practiced, I said. He's been doing this for years. You weren't stupid. You were lonely. I was so cruel to you. She started crying again. You were trying to protect me, and I called you selfish. I chose him over you. My own son. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to comfort her. Part of me was still angry about the 1.5 years of silence, the ultimatum, the campaign to take my home. I'm here now, I said finally. That's what matters. I helped where I could. Connected her with a financial counselor who specialized in helping people recover from financial abuse. Found her cult recovery resources, therapists who understood what she'd been through. Helped her find a new apartment, a new job, a way to start rebuilding. It took months just to begin processing what had happened. My mother went through stages: shame, denial, anger, grief. She'd lost money, but she'd also lost time, relationships, her sense of self. The teacher hadn't just stolen her savings. He'd stolen 2 years of her life and nearly stolen her son. She asked me once, about 6 months after he'd left, "Would you have given him the apartment? If I'd really left you forever and never come back?" I thought about it carefully. No. Because giving him the apartment wouldn't have saved you. It would have just made me another victim. And then when he left, and he always leaves, we'd both have nothing. At least this way, one of us could help the other rebuild. She asked if I would have given the apartment if she'd really left forever. I said no. Because giving it wouldn't have saved her. It would have just made me a victim too. And when he left, and he always leaves, we'd both have nothing. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to be destroyed alongside someone you love. Update 5. The rebuilding. It's been 3 years now since that phone call. 3 years since the teacher disappeared with everything my mother had given him. She's 73 now, still working part-time at a clinic, her retirement pushed back indefinitely because of what she lost. We have coffee every Sunday at my apartment. The apartment the teacher wanted. The apartment that would have been his spiritual center if I'd given in to the pressure. Last Sunday, she looked around my living room, the same room where she'd once tried to plant crystals to cleanse the negative energy blocking my compliance. "He said this place had extraordinary energy," she said quietly. "That it was destined for a higher purpose." "It has good light," I replied. "That's about it." She almost smiled. "He made everything sound meaningful. Even real estate. I can't believe I fell for it." "You were looking for something," I said. "He promised to provide it. That's how it works." "Thank you for not giving him this place," she said. "Even when I told you I'd leave you forever. Even when I said all those horrible things. You held the line when I couldn't." "You're my mother," I said. "He was a stranger who wanted your money. Not a hard choice." But that wasn't entirely true. It had been the hardest choice of my life. Watching her walk away. Not knowing if I'd ever see her again. Wondering if I was making the right decision or if I was just being stubborn, choosing property over family. The waiting had been the hardest part. The not knowing. The fear that this was permanent, that I'd lost my mother to a con artist's promises of enlightenment. But I'd been right. Not giving him the apartment hadn't cost me my mother. It had saved us both. Because when the teacher inevitably left, when the con collapsed as it always does, I was still standing. I had stability to offer. I had a home where my mother could come for coffee on Sundays and slowly remember who she was before she met a man who called himself a spiritual teacher. The apartment isn't special. It has good light and reasonable rent. But it was the ground I stood on when everything else was falling apart. It was the thing I protected when protecting it seemed like the cruelest choice. And now it's where my mother and I rebuild what was nearly destroyed. She's not fully recovered. Financially, she may never be. The $40,000 is gone, along with years of compound interest she'll never get back. But she has her relationships again. Her friends. Her family. Her son. And she understands now what she couldn't see then. The teacher didn't want to help her ascend. He wanted to help himself to her money. The spiritual center wasn't about healing others. It was about financing his lifestyle. Some of his other followers never figured it out. They still defend him online, claiming he was driven out by jealous forces, that he's doing important work in Florida. The delusion persists even after the evidence is overwhelming. That's how deep these things go. But my mother woke up. And when she did, I was still there. My mother asked me to give my apartment to a cult leader. She believed he could cleanse my karma for 7 lifetimes. She believed he was a holy man with extraordinary gifts. She believed my refusal was dark forces blocking her spiritual growth. I believed the background check. I believed the lawsuits. I believed the pattern of exploitation across 3 states. We believed different things. But only one of us had evidence. I kept the apartment. She kept the con man, for 18 more months, until he took everything and disappeared to Florida. Now she's rebuilding. We're rebuilding. She lost over $40,000, but she could have lost more. She could have lost her son. She came close. 18 months of silence. An ultimatum that made me choose between my home and my mother. The apartment I wouldn't surrender is where she has coffee with me now. Where we talk about her recovery. Where she slowly becomes my mother again instead of a cult member wearing my mother's face. The apartment isn't special. It has good light, reasonable location, manageable payments. But it's mine. I kept it when keeping it meant losing her temporarily. I kept it because giving it away wouldn't have saved her, only made me another resource for a man who saw people as extraction opportunities. She understands now. She didn't then. That's how cults work. The victim can't see the con until it ends. All I could do was protect myself, refuse to enable the exploitation, and wait. The waiting was the hardest part. But the apartment made it possible. Having something solid when everything else was falling apart. That's what property is sometimes. Not just investment. Not just housing. It's stability when people you love go temporarily insane. Ground to stand on when the world tilts. I stood. I waited. She came back. That's the story. That's why the apartment matters. Not karma. Not blessings. Not 7 lifetimes of spiritual cleansing. Just being there, still standing, still waiting, when she finally woke up.